Let's stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome and good morning, members. A couple small announcements. This, of course, is our third internet presentation. The last presentation we had was viewed by 133 members as of last count, which was this morning, and you'll recall that our first presentation had 183 or so members. I would ask that anybody that had programs that they think would be appropriate for this group, if we could have you send those programs into our program chairman or Jim, our program chairman. About 10 years ago, one of our members, while traveling back home from Germany, when he became stranded on a desert island, one day he saw a speck out on the horizon, and he looked at it and he says, "Oh, that can't be a ship." And it kept coming closer and closer, and he says, "No, it's not a rowboat or a raft." And a little later, a person came up out of the surf wearing scuba gear, a wetsuit, and they stood there and they looked at him for a minute, and they took off. The person took off their tank, and they took their mask off and the hood of their wetsuit, and there was a beautiful blonde woman. Oh my. And she walked up to him and said, "Tell me, sir, how long has it been since you had a good cigar?" And Tom said, "It's been 10 years since I've been here." Well, she unzipped the pocket on her left sleeve and took out a package of fresh cigars and a lighter and gave them to him. Tom took a puff on the cigar and says, "Oh, my goodness, it's been so long that I forgot how long it was since I've had a good cigar." And she said, "Well, Tom, how long has it been since you've had a drink of excellent good whiskey?" And Tom says, "Oh, it's been 10 years. And she unzipped the pocket on her right sleeve and took out a flask and handed it to Tom, and Tom took a big gulp of it and said, "Oh my, I think that's nectar of the gods. It's really good." And she then started to unzip the front of her wetsuit, and she said, "Tom, how long has it been since you played around?" Tom was shocked. He says, "Don't tell me you had a set of golf clubs in there." Okay, now to introduce our esteemed speaker this morning, I'm going to turn the program over to Jim DeFrench.
Thank you, John. It's always a pleasure to introduce Chief Williams. He's got a great background, and you're going to hear a lot about that, I'm sure, in his remarks. He's been a Wilmington man his whole life, and he was raised by a single mom over in Creekwood. So you know he's certainly from the school of hard knocks. He knows about that. And but he went on, he got education credentials. He got a BA in Management and Organization Development from Mount Olive, and he attended the Graduate Administrative Officer Management program at NC State. He's had lots of different kinds of jobs in the police department. He's going to tell you about those. What I find most interesting, though, is he started work as a summer youth worker in the chief's office in 1992. Now he's the chief of police in the same office. Quite an achievement. And he's going to tell us about it. Thank you again, Chief, for coming, and we can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here this morning. You're right. I got an early start in law enforcement, but I'm going to take you back to what inspired me to become a Wilmington police officer. Back when I was probably 8, 9, or 10, living in the Creekwood community, we had officers that worked public housing. There were 2 officers, and a lot of people that are old school in the community is going to remember the 2 that were housing officers, and then there was 1 K-9 officer. There was Gerald Lincoln and Thad Waddell, and we actually lost Thad about 2 weeks ago. He passed away. And there was a 3rd, Bruce Hickman, who was our first K-9 officer. So when I was a kid, this is what I would see. I would see Hickman riding around in a big K5 Blazer, which our young folks probably don't remember those. And he had this big Rottweiler that was inside of that vehicle. And I will never forget, I was scared of dogs. He took the dog outside the vehicle and actually let us pet that dog. The first field trip that I went on outside of the city of Wilmington was to the Ashboro Zoo. Lincoln and Waddell took me and 2 bus loads of kids on that field trip. So looking at these guys, that's what inspired me to become an officer. Now, at one point in my career as a teenager, I teeter-tottered with fast money and getting caught up in the drug game, selling drugs. And I got in a real bad accident. I almost lost my left leg, and I think that was kind of God telling me something too. And I just decided to go to school and just try to hang in there and do what was right. And I ended up getting the summer youth job in between my junior and senior year of school. I impressed Chief Darrell Bristol. And Chief Bristol made a challenge to me. He was like, young man, if you go back and finish high school, I will have a job for you in the cadet program. And I was like, yeah, right, we'll see, but what do I have to lose?
That's right.
So I went back, finished that last year of school, graduated. I called the chief up because I had his personal direct number, having worked in his office. And shortly thereafter, I was in that cadet program as a police cadet for the Wilmington Police Department. Stayed in that program for 2 years working part-time. Also learned to drive school bus and ended up getting my commercial driver's license. So at the age of 20, I was hired as a Wilmington police officer. I was sent off to basic law enforcement training. I graduated. One problem when I graduated, you had to be 21 to be a Wilmington police officer, so I still wasn't 21 yet. So on my 21st birthday, December 7th, 1992, I'll never forget that day I was sworn in as a Wilmington police officer. My first year on the department, we were under Chief Bob Wadman at the time, and he had just brought in a new concept called community-oriented policing. And the city was divided up into 4 areas. We had base stations. I was one of the first trainees to complete training under the community policing model. So I believed in community policing because that's how I was trained initially. That was my beginning for me. And then I had observed these role models coming up. Even though we didn't call it community policing at that time, it wasn't officially called that by the department, that's what they were doing. They were doing community-oriented policing. So I worked on patrol for a year. My first year on the department, I earned the Officer of the Year award, which to me was one of my biggest accomplishments, being a new officer.
Absolutely.
And since then, being the chief, I have created a Rookie of the Year award that we're going to start giving out to our new rookie officers. And after a year on patrol, I wanted to get back to the community I came from. So I was assigned to the housing unit. I worked Creekwood, Houston Moore, Hillcrest, at the time Gervais, Solomon Towers, Rankin Terrace. Did that for a year, and I really wanted to get involved with our youth. And at the time, the Wilmington Police Department was teaching drug abuse resistance education, a DARE program. I was selected for that position, went off, I became a DARE instructor. And what's so touching about me teaching DARE, I have a police corporal right now that I taught her DARE when she was 10 years old, and I promoted her to corporal. I have a crime analyst that I taught DARE when she was 10 years old. And I didn't mention this, but early on during my career, my first sergeant was Gerald Lincoln, who impacted me, and my second sergeant was Thad Waddell.
Right.
So as you can see, the favor is getting paid back here.
That's right.
So I did there for a couple of years. I went on to be a crime prevention officer, worked in our public information office, interacted with the media, that pretty good assignment. Then the department decided I needed to transfer to patrol, back to patrol. They saw something in me that I could not see in myself. I went back out to patrol. I was placed with Gerald Lincoln again, and he retired. And when he retired, I took over his squad as the senior officer for a year. We then created what are called street teams, and the modern day version of that is our mobile field force that works our high crime areas. And I did that for about 6 months. I took sergeant's test. I was promoted to the rank of sergeant. The department did something to me that they'd never done before. All of my career was spent working in the inner city. We just annexed out around Landfall, those places, a few years prior to me being promoted.
Where I live.
Put me out there. That's where they put me at. Totally different world. I was lost. A whole totally different style of policing, different problems, different concerns. So I did that for 6 months, and I then went to supervise K9. I had K9, I had mounted, which I knew nothing about horses. Quick learning curve there. Warrant squad, we reestablished a housing unit. I did that. Promoted to lieutenant in 2005, one of the youngest lieutenants in the history of the department. I served as a watch commander, a district commander, and then I ended up getting my dream job. I wanted to be the fleet manager. And you would think a guy that spent that much time on the street, why would you want to be the fleet manager? Because I wanted to learn the other side of policing. I wanted to learn the business side. How do we pay the bills? How do we manage the budget? So I did that for about a year. Bruce Hickman, the K9 officer that I told you about earlier, he retired as a captain in 2009. When he retired, I ended up getting his spot. Again, amazing how this pay it back, you pay it forward, it comes around and around. So promoted to captain. I spent 4 or 5 years in our support services division. That's where you learn, like I say, the budget, records management, evidence, the business side of the organization. I became very bored doing that job because I had done it so long, I can do it in my sleep basically. There was no excitement to it, but I mean, it's a necessary job that has to be done to keep the department running. So Evangelist, he called me in one day, he said, you're going to patrol because you need patrol experience. So I tried to look sad, but I was like, yes, finally, I'm getting patrol. And when I ended up getting patrol, it was 2014, January, and I'll never forget, I wrote him a 15-page plan of some of the things that I felt we needed to do as an agency, and some of our interactions with some of our communities that we needed to focus more in. And we did a lot of great things. We expanded our PAL program, which is our Police Activities League. We added more sports. We added a team night, which was very important to me, back interacting with the kids. We really got into our communities deeper than what we were already in them. And then Ferguson hit. And when Ferguson hit, law enforcement was under that microscope. But the good thing about us, we were already months ahead of Ferguson, so we didn't have to struggle as hard as some of the other agencies had to struggle to adjust. So I stayed down there on patrol. It was a dream job. I loved it. Every day you're at the seat of your pants. You're flying at the seat of your pants. You don't know, you may work a 12-hour day, you may work an 8-hour day, it just all depends. I would come out, work nights with the troops. I just loved being the captain of the patrol. An opportunity came available for a deputy chief's position. So I went through that process, came out at the top. I was promoted to deputy chief, and I was responsible for vice and criminal investigations, which is something I'd never done before in my career. So whole nother aspect of my career, vice and criminal investigations. I did the deputy chief's position for about a year, and in 2018, the assistant chief's position became available. And Ralph promoted me to assistant chief right when Florence was taking place. So I had to deal with all of that, and I ran all operations for the department, and we made it through that. And we made it through that because of the resiliency of the men and women of the Wilmington Police Department. And 2019, Ralph pulled me in again, and he said, look it, and he likes to use the term look it if you talk to him. He said, look it, I'm not gonna be here too much longer. I'm probably going to retire. And I was in culture shock for about a day or two. And he asked me, he said, do you think you'd be interested in the position? And to be honest, my early career goal was to be a sergeant. I just wanted to be a sergeant. The reason I wanted to be a sergeant, because that's what Thad was. That's what Gerald was. That's what Bruce was when I came in the agency. I had no desire to be a lieutenant or captain or deputy chief. But you know, God had something different for me. And I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. Would I be interested in being the chief? And I went home and I prayed on it. I thought about it, and I went back and I told Ralph, I said, yeah, I think there's going to be some interest there. So Ralph started preparing me to potentially be the chief of this agency. One of the first things he did was he sent me to the Senior Management Institute in Boston, offered by Perf. That was a dream school to go to. So I spent the summer of 2019 in Boston. Longest I've ever been away from the city of Wilmington. An entire month in Boston, had a great time, learned a lot, connected with a lot of people. Came back from Perth, and then Ralph was talking retirement stuff again. I was like, well, maybe he's just talking about it. Maybe he'll change his mind on this. He wasn't changing his mind. He was dead set on that. So I was worried about that and the training facility, our new training facility. I have been the project manager on our training facility project for the police department since 2009. So we were in the final stages of completing that building. So I was working on trying to get that building completed. I was worrying about Ralph retiring, and I was like, well, maybe he'll forget about it. Well, he come in one day, he said, I'm going to announce it probably on December the 3rd. And the reason he picked December the 3rd, and this shows his character, we were doing the ribbon cutting on that building on December the 2nd, and he didn't want anything to be taken away from that building. He did not want anything to be taken away from that training facility. So we did the ribbon cutting on December the 2nd, and on December 3rd, I'll never forget, we went to the council meeting, and he announced that he was retiring. And then reality really started setting in there. So we went through the motions of transition. Council appointed me as the interim chief. I took over. COVID hit. One of the worst things that could happen to me as a new chief. And the issue with COVID, what made it unique in comparison to a hurricane or another natural disaster, you can normally request mutual aid, or you can go in and you can research and find out what other departments had done. Nobody had done anything with it because this is the first pandemic we'd ever seen this magnitude. So one of the first things that I challenged our staff to start doing, I was like, well, guys, there's no research here, so why don't we do this? Let's reach out to the agencies that are at ground zero in Washington that are several weeks ahead of us. Let's see what they're doing. And that will give us some idea on what to do. And about that same time, Perf really stepped up to the plate. They started sending out these daily updates on what different agencies were doing. So our biggest concern was our officers getting sick and impacting a whole squad or a whole platoon, because we were seeing agencies where they would have 30, 40 officers in quarantine at one time. And we just changed our whole daily operational model based on COVID. One of the first things we did is we eliminated our officers placing people in the patrol cars with them, and we started using our prisoner transport vehicle. And during the heat of COVID, we were not putting people directly in patrol cars with officers. And we've actually gone back to using that prisoner transport. We had kind of gotten away from it, but I recently instructed them to go back because we don't know where this curve's going to go with this thing. One of our captains, he came up with a very innovative idea, and he called it COVID wedges. So a lot of the doors inside of headquarters, we put wedges in them for people wouldn't have to touch the doors to open them. We changed the calls that we would respond directly to. And then the whole wearing of the mask, that was a little awkward at first. And I can say this, the chief and a half that I have at home was very adamant that I wear a mask. So at one point, I was the only one at the police department wearing a mask because the chief and a half at home said, you better have that mask on your face. And then it came down that we need to make folks wear masks, and it took some adjusting, some getting used to, but our people are now pretty much used to wearing them. Knock on wood, we have had a small percentage of our employees actually contract COVID. I have had a bunch of people go in quarantine. I was actually in quarantine for one day because I went to a call and the guy tested positive for COVID. And one of the things that we do, instead of just automatically putting everybody in quarantine, we go back and look at the video from the call to see who was actually in close proximity to him. And me, I didn't go anywhere near him, but we need to look at the video and just verify that to be safe. Some other challenges with COVID, it caused us to think out of the box. At one point, we had a lot of employees working from home, which is new for a police department, especially with our non-sworn positions. So we had to rethink some of our processes and how we do business. And we made it through COVID. I would consider we made it through so far pretty well. And then the social injustice and all the social disorder took place.
Yeah.
And on top of all of that, council appointed me as police chief on June 23rd. On June 24th, I had to fire 3 officers that were captured on video making inappropriate comments. First day on the job, my first official full day wearing these 4 stars, I had to stand before a national audience and do a press conference. And it went, when I say a national audience, we had CBS, I did an interview with them, we had NBC, we had ABC called, and we had Fox, you name it, they called. And my big fear with that was how was our community going to react to it. And people say that had to be hard firing the officers. Well, that wasn't hard because that was the right thing to do. That was easy. The hard part was figuring how we're going to tell this to our community and what the reaction will be. And my thing was, let's just tell them as much information as we can tell them, and we'll take our lumps on it, and we're going to move forward from it. And that's what we did. We went to council, we got special permission to release more information that we normally would be able to release. And we just put it all out there. And I will never forget that press conference. When I went to that press conference, I figured, man, I'm gonna be in here for an hour. They're gonna have like 50 questions. We put out so much information, there was one question that was asked during the entire press conference. And it was something very minor. It was so minor I can't even remember what it was. So after that, then I knew what was gonna be next. Every officer in law enforcement was already painted, but because of the actions of those 3 officers, every Wilmington police officer was going to be painted. And I knew there were some things that we had to do and we needed to do quick to ensure our community that they could trust us. And when I say community, I talk about 51 square miles, 122,000 residents. And I've said this before, I'm not just the police chief for one group. I'm not the police chief for men, I'm not the police chief for women, I'm the police chief for everybody. And that was my biggest concern. So one of the things that I decided that we need to do what I like to call a cultural reset. And we, in law enforcement, we always need to look at different and better ways to do things. So one of the first things that I wanted us to do was define what our vision was as an organization. And we've never done that. We never had a vision statement. We've had a mission statement, and the cities had a vision. The cities had values, but as far as the police department goes, we needed a vision of where we're going at in the future. So we put together a committee. We came up with a vision. We came up with values, and we updated our mission statement that hadn't been updated in 25 years. And I'm still learning the new mission statement. I know the old one like the back of my hand. I take partnership with the community, respect for human dignity, organizational excellence. I know that one. I learned that one as a young officer. So we're going through that phase now, and our mission, our vision, and our values are going to tie to our daily operations on how we do business. Employee performance will tie back to those. We're planning our future strategic plans. Any of those documents we do They tie back to our vision, our values, and our missions. If we have to discipline an employee and take corrective action, it's based on those things in addition to city policy and North Carolina law.
Right.
The next thing I wanted to do was, I like to call it the wall of transparency. And I want you to picture a brick wall. You have citizens on one side, you have police on one side. You can't take all of the bricks out of the wall, because if you take all the bricks out of the wall's going to collapse. And there's some bricks that have to stay in the wall, because if we're doing a sensitive investigation, if we're talking juveniles, if we're talking personnel, you can't pull those bricks out of the wall. They have to stay in there. We just cannot disclose those things. But there are other things that you can pull out of that wall that we hadn't done before to open it up where you can see each other on both sides. And one of the first things that we're doing is called Project ABLE, and it stands for Active Bystandership for Law Enforcement. And it's based on what's called the EPIC model down in New Orleans. And they use active bystandership training in the airline industry and the medical industry. And to sum it up, basically what it does is it teaches you, if you see a partner that's making a mistake, you call them out on it and you fix the mistake and correct it. In the airline industry, they were having co-pilots sitting there watching pilots make mistakes and not say anything, and then the plane crashes. So we're doing that same approach with law enforcement. And we actually are one of the first 26 departments in the country to take on this model. Last week, I sent one of my instructors to the first training the trainer session. And we have another instructor that will go to the actual first class session this week. And once those guys complete their training, they will come back. We will train the command staff in this model. They will train their divisions in this model, and then the entire agency. Duty to intervene policies are great, but they're going to do you no good if your people don't have the tools on how to intervene or how to stop the abuse or the behavior. And this benefits the citizens, but it also benefits each other. Because you may have an officer that arrests somebody, handcuffs them, and doesn't search them, and the other officer sitting around seeing this and don't say anything. Well, the reason for the search is for you not to get hurt or get somebody else hurt. Yeah, evidence is one thing, but the big thing is if you put somebody in the car behind you, you want to make sure they don't have a weapon on them. So that's a big thing that we're doing, Project ABLE. I'm real excited. Again, we're one of the first departments in the country, and we're one of the smaller departments. When we sent our guys to training, he was there with NYPD, LAPD, Philadelphia. We were there with the big boys in law enforcement.
Yeah.
So we're being very progressive with that one. Implicit bias training. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Lori Friedel out of the University of South Florida. She is one of the leading experts in the country on fair and impartial policing. We have Dr. Friedel and her group scheduled coming here in December. They're going to do a session with the command staff. We're going to do a session with some key community members. And then we will train 20 train the trainers, and they'll be certified for 2 years, and they will go back and teach the entire agency on fair and impartial policing. We're going to involve citizens in the policing process more. Promotional boards. I recently promoted captains, and I recently promoted lieutenants. In the past, those promotional boards would be 100% law enforcement. With the captains process, it was 10% law enforcement. 20% law enforcement, 20% City of Wilmington, and 60% citizen. And we wanted citizens to have an input in the policing process, because at the end of the day, that's who we serve. We serve the community. And with our lieutenants, the board was 20% law enforcement and 80% citizen. The city is looking at doing a citizen review board for law enforcement, which I'm open to it. It just needs to be constructed correctly to where it benefits the citizen and the police officer. We're part of a pilot project with the NC School of Government and North Carolina Association of Chiefs of Police, where we're going to look at citations for minor offense in lieu of having to take people to jail. Right now, with COVID, you don't want to put people in your patrol car unless you have to. So on these minor offenses, we're going to see if we can issue citations and see what the benefits are to those. And it ties in with the whole cash bail reform measures that are taking place. We're concerned about the stress of our people and their well-being through all of this. Our officers work 10, 12-hour shifts. That's a long time to be on shift. It's a long time. So one of the things that I'm working on creating are soft spaces in the police station where they can come in, they can take their gun belt off for their lunch break. This goes against everything I've ever been taught in law enforcement, but a 10, 12-hour shift on their lunch break, you may need an officer that needs a power nap to recharge themselves.
That's right.
So we're going to look at setting up the building that way. Right now, a lot of folks work out, which you have an awesome gym facility, but everybody doesn't work out on duty. We're trying to attract a younger officer, so one of the things we're looking at is video games. We may buy some Xboxes for our younger officers and come in and play video games.
That's right.
And we have citizens that are helping out with this project, so this is going to be a public-private partnership. We have a design firm that has donated their time to help design the spaces. So I'm real excited about this project, and I'm gonna use some drug seizure money for it also. We've extended our officers' meal breaks. They used to would only get 30 minutes. Again, that's 12, 10-hour shifts. They need an hour. They need an hour to recharge. You say what?
If you're lucky to get that.
Yeah, we're gonna get it. We're gonna get it for them. Another big thing that we have done is the way that our patrol squads are set up. You'll have a sergeant, you'll have ideally 2 corporals, and you have officers. We were using the corporals as basically officers with chevrons on their sleeves. They would be in charge if the sergeant's out. One of the things, we have a young workforce, and officers are going to make mistakes. They're human. So one of the recent changes that we've done is we've designated our corporals as assistant supervisors. And we want to increase our supervision in the field for when we see minor things happening, we can go ahead and address it then before it becomes a bigger issue. My goal is to put IA out of business where they have nothing to do because we're catching everything in the field and we're addressing it there in the field. And I've told these supervisors, I'm like, you don't need to write people up for everything. A lot of times you just pull them to the side and just talk to them. You have to talk to them like they're people. Yeah. We're going to civilianize some of our sworn positions. Traffic crashes. We investigate about 7,500 traffic crashes a year, reportable traffic crashes. 6,000 of those crashes have no injuries. So in theory, we don't have to have an officer take those crashes. Since, I'm gonna be honest, people just don't want to be police officers like they used to, and hiring a police officer takes so long, we're going to civilianize some of those crash investigations positions. We're going to get the work done a different way by using civilians versus using sworn police officers. I have launched my recent Behind the Badge series, which is on our YouTube channel. And every Friday, we release a new episode where we focus in on a unit within the police department. Last week, we focused in on our bomb squad. And our newest member of the bomb squad, which I am so excited. I can't wait until she gets here. She is an almost 2-year-old lab named Marion. And it's a partnership with the ATF. And she is awesome. She can sniff thousands of different things, and for us to have a bomb dog, it is a nice resource for us to have here in our community. And we want to continue with our crime reduction efforts, our gun violence. To give you an idea, last year we responded to 173,000 calls for service. 173,000. And I love to share this number with people. Our Wilmington police officers only use force 163 times. 163 times out of 173,000 calls for service. And we have some great people on our organization. I don't know if you were following the news. We had a young man that was in some form of crisis. Something was going on with him, and he barricaded himself in a house out in the Creekwood community. He fired on my SWAT team. And those guys did what their training taught them to do, and that's why they train so often. They didn't react on emotion. They didn't react on fear. They reacted on training and best practices by the National Tactical Officers Association. And we were able to resolve that incident without having to use deadly force. And I am proud of each and every officer on that SWAT team that was there. So that's a little bit of
Well,
what's been going on with us.
Here's, I've got to say this. The chief has been around the police business. He certainly knows it in and out, everything about it. And now you hear him talk, he's trying new things. He's working outside the box. You know, Chief, I think it won't be long before other police departments are going to come to Wilmington and see what Wilmington's doing about things. It really sounds like you're really out in front.
It is, and it goes back to the people. Those 300 plus employees. We have some great people. They're the ones that make this stuff happen.
Yeah, that's right.
They are.
And you're giving them great leadership, so it's a wonderful thing. Thank you so much for being here with us.
No, thank you for having me and supporting us as we work to make this community better.
Okay, you bet.
Chief, we asked the many people that watch this program to forward any questions that they had, and we had one question from a member, John Weiss, and John asked, does the police department help ICE agents serve warrants and deter those people named in the warrants?
No, we don't. We don't actively do that. Now, if we arrest them and take them to jail, there's a process where they will check it there, but no, we don't. We do not proactively do that.
Okay.
How's the fentanyl abuse right now going on?
It's still there. It's going. I know last week we had several overdoses.
Is it going up or down, do you think?
I would say it's probably about the same. It's about the same.
Well, thank you very much, Chief, for taking time out of your busy schedule to come down here and make this presentation to us. It's a tradition with the Senior Men's Club to present our speakers with a pen. And some of the speakers that we get year after year, that are like yourself, and hopefully you'll collect these pens and have more than 7. Your predecessor had 7 of these, talked to us for 7 years. So we're happy to present you with the first one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief.